Case study: White versus Bluett. Case summary: White versus Bluett 1853 is a cornerstone case in English contract law, exploring the concept of consideration and its essentiality for forming a binding agreement. It challenges the notion of promises without tangible benefit being enforceable contracts. Fact of the case: Mr. Bluett borrowed money from his son, Mr. Young Bluett, and signed a promissory note acknowledging the debt. Before Mr. Bluett's death, he orally promised Mr. Young Bluett that he wouldn't have to repay the debt if he stopped complaining about the inheritance distribution among siblings. Mr. Young Bluett ceased complaining, but after Mr. Bluett's death, the executor Mr. White demanded repayment of the debt. Mr. Young Bluett argued that his father's promise not to enforce the debt constituted a valid agreement based on his act of stopping complaints. Issues: Did Mr. Young Bluett's act of ceasing complaints constitute sufficient consideration for the contract, making his father's promise to waive the debt legally binding? Can promises unsupported by tangible benefit, such as refraining from actions one has a right to do, be enforceable contracts? Is there a minimum threshold of value required for consideration to be deemed valid in forming a contract? Decision: The Court of the Exchequer Chamber, by a majority decision, ruled in favor of Mr. White. They held that Mr. Young Bluett's act of stopping complaints did not constitute valid consideration because he had no legal right to complain in the first place. The inheritance distribution was solely within Mr. Bluett's discretion, and Mr. Young Bluett had no legitimate claim to challenge it. A promise unsupported by valid consideration, however seemingly moral or appealing, cannot be enforced as a binding contract. Significance of the case: White versus Bluett established a critical principle in contract law: promises alone, without valuable consideration, do not hold legal weight. It reinforced the requirement for a reciprocal exchange of something of value, money, service, benefit, for a contract to be valid. Clarified that actions performed out of moral duty or pre-existing obligation cannot substitute for genuine consideration. Served as a landmark case in upholding the principle of certainty and predictability in contract formation. Elements of consideration: For a contract to be enforceable, it must have valid consideration. Consideration can be something of value, money, goods, services, or any tangible benefit exchanged between the parties. Detriment to the promisee: the act of doing something or refraining from doing something at the promiser's request. Legal: the act or benefit must be lawful and not contrary to public policy. Applying White versus Bluett to other cases. This case has been cited and distinguished in subsequent rulings regarding consideration in diverse contract scenarios. Cases involving promises to settle existing debts often consider whether the settlement agreement offers any additional benefit beyond extinguishing the existing obligation. Agreements based on promises of future gifts or inheritances are frequently scrutinized for the presence of valid consideration, as mere expectation might not suffice. The case continues to influence legal debates about the boundaries of consideration in specific situations, such as agreements based on moral obligations or promises to perform public duties. Conclusion. White v. Bluett remains a pivotal case in English contract law, emphasizing the importance of consideration in forming enforceable agreements. It reminds us that promises, while morally binding, require a tangible exchange of value to become legally enforceable contracts. This principle contributes to clarity, fairness, and predictability in contractual relationships. If you are a law student and looking for more case studies, visit our website www.mylawtutor.net.